We're continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series. Today we're looking at the Carolina Hurricanes. What will we expect from them? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we're continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series. We're getting to the top of the league. There's not too many teams left except for the few that are in the playoffs still. And of course, we have the couple teams above Carolina here, which would be Vegas and Colorado, which will be coming up here very soon. So we're going to take a look at the regular season stats for the Hurricanes, look at their cap space, also look at their expiring contracts, and discuss the top burning questions facing this franchise going into the offseason. So let's dive in and get started with our regular season stats review. You can see the Hurricanes had a really solid year, one of the league's top teams with 36-12-8 record for 80 points. They end up losing in the second round of the playoffs after defeating the Nashville Predators. They then fell to the Tampa Bay Lightning. They ended up with a plus 43 goal differential, which is extremely solid. They were scoring at a good pace and keeping the puck out of their own net. Their special teams were both fantastic as well. They had the number 2 power play in the league with a 25.6% success rate and the number 3 penalty kill for an 85.2 success rate. So that is a phenomenal stat on both sides. Generally, if you're going to be a cup contender, you need to be near the top of the league, or at least in the top 10 in both of those categories when it comes to their special teams. So that is a large part of why they had so much success. Of course, they got great goaltending, solid blue line, and just an all-around well-built team, well-coached by Coach of the Year, Rod Brind'Amour. Now, this team right now going into the offseason has $29.4 million in salary cap space. So that might sound like a lot, but they do have a lot of contracts that are expiring, and some fairly significant ones at that need to be signed or replaced. Now, of course, we've recently got word in the last little while here that head coach Rod Brind'Amour did re-sign, so he's going to be around for a while longer. It's a multi-year deal. I believe it was at least 3 years that he's going to be with the Hurricanes, and of course he was holding out, trying to get all of his supporting staff around him looked after as well. A majority of those people will indeed be back. So it was very important to get Brind'Amour looked after. And now we got to look at what other players on this team needs new deals. And will they be looked after? Will they be traded, or will they sign elsewhere? We'll get into all that here momentarily. But let's look first at the list of expiring deals. Now, on the restricted free agent side of things, they get a big one with the former number 2 overall pick in the draft a few years back, Andrei Svechnikov. Now, Svechnikov has turned out to be an excellent player for them, bound to be a 30 to 40 goal scorer, I think, on a consistent basis, especially during his prime years in the NHL. So he needs a new contract. It's believed that they've been negotiating for a little while. Some big numbers have been thrown at him, and he's yet to accept. So I'm not sure exactly how this is going to go, but it's going to be a fairly long-term and a fairly expensive deal by the looks of things. It might be a little shorter term. Term might be a sticking point here. The Canes are probably pushing for 7 or 8 years to get the AAV down, but he may be wanting a shorter-term deal so he can cash in again later in the not-too-distant future when league revenues are better. Now, we've also got Warren Foegele as well as Alex Nedeljkovic. Now, Nedeljkovic ended up being a really solid rookie netminder, a little bit older, but he's well-groomed through his time in the American Hockey League and really made a big difference for them, especially when guys like Reimer and Mrazek dealt with some injuries this past year. Mrazek was out for a good stretch there, and Nedeljkovic really was a really important piece, and Foegele could find himself moved. We'll get into that a little bit later here. On the UFA side, they have a decent list of players here as well, including Cedric Paquette, Jordan Martinook, Brock McGinn, defenseman Yanni Hakanpää, who they acquired earlier in the year, turned out to be a pretty good fit there. And of course, the big one, though, is Dougie Hamilton. Hamilton's the big fish on the free agent market that could be the one of the bigger contracts that we see signed this offseason. And both goalies outside of Nedeljkovic, including James Reimer and Peter Mrazek, are both unrestricted free agents here as well. So they certainly have their fair bit of questions facing this franchise. They have a lot of space, but as you can see, they have a lot of guys that need new deals. So those players are either signed or they're traded or replaced in some capacity. So now let's dive in to the top burning questions facing the Hurricanes as we get into the full swing of this NHL offseason. Number 1, the most important question facing this team, there's no doubt, is the future of top right shot defenseman Dougie Hamilton. Will he sign and stay? Will he not? Right now, all indications point to the fact that he's likely leaving because they've already given him what they feel is their max offer. At least that's what's being reported. and they have yet to come to an agreement. They've also given him consent to speak with other teams, even though it's not the free agent period, and you normally wouldn't have that. They have granted him that wish. Now, they've done that so he can speak to teams and get a gauge for what's out there before free agency actually gets underway. I think their plan here is they're hoping that perhaps he'll kind of see that maybe there's not as much of a market out there as he thought for getting that much more money, and he might see, okay, this Carolina Hurricane team for me is an excellent fit. He's bounced around a little bit, started in Boston, went to Calgary, ended up in Carolina. From a personal standpoint, just fitting in, good group, there's a great fit there for Dougie Hamilton. And, I think he probably would prefer to stay, but of course he wants to be paid appropriately too. So if he explores the market ahead of time with consent like he's doing right now, there could be a situation that if he finds a deal he really likes, that he has to either do a sign and trade, which is not very common in the NHL. We do see that in other leagues like the NBA, a little bit more. But if that's not the case, then they trade his signing rights. They get maybe a mid-round pick, or they get something back in return, and then he signs a contract with the other team. So the advantage of the sign and trade is he can get 8 years with Carolina, and he can't elsewhere. If he ends up on the other roster, he's only getting 7 years because he had to be on that roster dating back to the trade deadline to qualify to be an existing member of that franchise to get the 8th year. So his future looms large over this franchise. If they can't sign him, then they're not in a situation where they have to panic too bad, because they do have a fairly deep blue line. But like I said, he's a bit of a unique piece back there. I'm not sure exactly how they will react to losing him. They would have some available money at that point to go find maybe a cheaper version of what he can do, but not going to be the same player. So hard to say, but that's a major, major decision that will impact this franchise in a big way, one way or the other, soon enough. Number 2 burning question is, who's your goaltending tandem next year? To me, one of them, and it's Alex Nedeljkovic. James Reimer's pretty much a goner for sure. There's no reason for him to come back. He likely signs elsewhere as a free agent if he can find a deal. Peter Mrazek could come back, but it really boils down to money and what he wants as a role, because Nedeljkovic proved this year that he can be the starter. So if Mrazek is willing to accept a role as that he may not be the starter all the time, they could be more of a 1A, 1B scenario, which is going to obviously pay him a little bit less too, then maybe he stays. But I think he probably explores the market, sees what's out there. He'd have to be confident he could get a starting job somewhere else. And if he's not, maybe he returns and they could run with the same tandem a little bit longer. That's a real possibility. But if it's not, and he has an opportunity to sign elsewhere, be a starter, make more money, then we might have to see the Hurricanes go into the goalie market and likely bring in some other veteran on a cheaper contract, on a shorter term, 1 or 2 year deal, to work with Nedeljkovic as probably more of a backup role, really. Mrazek's the kind of guy who could be a 1B, but I'm not sure how many 1Bs are going to be out there and available. There's lots of guys that are backup. So we'll see what happens, but certainly that's a big question as well, is who's your goalie tandem next year? Number 3, signing Mr. Svechnikov to a big money contract is going to probably happen this year. It's a matter of, is it short term? Is it long term? What is it? You need to get this deal done, and you wouldn't want to let it loom too long. We saw last year Sebastian Aho be presented an offer sheet, and he signed it. Now, of course, based on the offer, once we knew the full details, I think most of us acknowledge that there's no way they're going to let him go. They're going to match that money. But the Montreal Canadiens tried to snag him, and they tried to front load the contract with enough money that they thought the Hurricanes won't want to pay all those bonuses. They will, there's a good chance we're going to get the player here, and it didn't work out. So could another team approach Svechnikov as being an offer sheet target? Maybe, but after what we saw last year and how they reacted to it, it's probably a lot less likely. But still, this guy's earned himself a big raise. I'm not sure if we go 4 or 5 years or if it's 7 or 8, but still, he's a big piece of the team's future. You need to get him locked up as long a term as possible for you're the team, and getting that contract in place is going to be paramount for the franchise for this offseason. I mean, having that drag on to be a distraction would be a really bad thing. If they go into training camp and Svechnikov's not signed, like we've seen some other players do, like especially like some deals with the Leafs the last few years, like with Marner and Nylander, that would be really bad. You don't want that to happen. So hopefully we get something lined up here and they look after him appropriately in the short term. Number 4 is, how do they handle the expansion process? Clearly, the future of Dougie Hamilton will have an impact on things. If they came to terms with Dougie Hamilton, clearly they'd want to protect him on their protected list for expansion. But they also have guys like Brett Pesce and Jacob Slavin, and you've also got guys like Yanni Hakanpää, who's also a UFA but become an important piece back there. You've got Jake Bean to consider. You've also got Brady Shea back there. Like, they're bound to likely lose a defenseman. The odds are really high in expansion. So will they make a trade? I'm not sure how they handle this. I mean, to me, if Hamilton is going to be on the move, then probably your two that are protected for sure are Slavin and Pesce. Then you have Shea or Bean. And to me, I would probably protect Bean because he's a lot younger. But you know what? I'm not sure how they feel about it. And of course, like I said, you've also got Hakanpää, who's a free agent, but they don't have to protect him in that regard. They could sign him. I don't know how they do that either. But still, there's also Jake Gardiner in the mix. I think they'd be okay losing him. I don't see Seattle taking him, though. But either way, there's going to be better options than Gardiner available on this team. At the same time, though, like, a defenseman is likely to go. I'm not sure who they protect, and obviously that decision is going to be a big one for this team. And lastly here, will they end up trading Warren Foegele? There's a lot of belief that Foegele, as much as he likes being in Carolina, he would welcome a fresh start and some new scenery, given an opportunity to take on a bigger role. Foegele has been a good player for them, but he's kind of stuck behind the depth chart, behind Svechnikov and Niederreiter on the left side, and it's going to be awfully difficult for him to have a shot at being any kind of a regular top six player. He would be only there sporadically due to injury, or, you know, when some players are not playing as well, sometimes they get demoted for a short-term basis or whatever, but still, he's a player who could succeed and be a more successful player on another team. And there's lots of teams out there, like some of the teams that are going through rebuilds, where he might be able to get a bigger role. So I would not be shocked if Warren Foegele is a player that they do end up trading this offseason. And of course, they do have, like I said, some other free agents that they have to consider either signing or, you know, what they're going to do there. I think Hakanpää turned out to be a real nice find for them. I think they'll do what they can to get him under contract. I wonder about the future of Jordan Martinook. I mean, he's a real glue guy. He's not a big-time scorer for them, bottom six forward, but we've seen lots of video about how he interacts with Svechnikov and the other guys in the locker room, and, you know, just he's a leader on that team. He's worn a letter for a while, an important piece. I know he's having an off-season surgery, so he's obviously going to be derailed here a little bit, but I have to wonder what his future holds, and not having him there could be a big impact on the Hurricanes as well. So I'm sure that it's not as high on their priority list as some of the other items that we just discussed. But some of those players that are the glue guys are pretty important, and I would suspect that the decisions on those players will play a key role to how successful they can be next year as well. So those are the top questions for me facing the Hurricanes this offseason. I'd love to know what you think down below in the comments. Let me know. What moves do you expect from the Hurricanes? What are the most likely scenarios we see them address as we get into the full swing here of the summertime, heading into the 2021-22 season? If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors. And of course, we still have more videos coming in this series here in the coming days as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.